Let's see. No, no, we're recording. There it is.
Very
Ready to
nice.
go. Welcome, everybody. It's been too long. So many things we need to talk about, but Dr. Derek Strong did this great presentation for Dr. Verzal and I and our tiny little mini podcast. And we thought everybody in the group would really want to know more about this. So um,
Okay.
without further ado, I'm going to let Derek take it away. Dr. Derek.
All right. The way I like to organize things is I like to kind of tell you why I'm doing them and then get the kind of boring, nerdy stuff over with and then get to all the exciting stuff. So you end going, oh, that's really cool. I want to do that. All right. So hopefully I succeeded with that.
Mhm.
So this test has been out about 4 months. It's called the Metabolic Vulnerability Index. And right now it's available through LabCorp. So I have an account with a professional co-op, and whenever I want to do that, I just order it through them. And then any patient can go to any LabCorp near them, and then they can have this done. So what it is, this is according to their website. So it's a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometry, and it calculates a score, as you can see on there, based on the results of glyc, and I'm going to go over all these things and what they mean. Citrate, branched chain amino acids, small HDL particles from a 400 megahertz proton NMR spectra of serum or plasma samples. That's a mouthful. And so all those analytics are used to produce what are called the IVX, MMX, and the MVX. So it's a combination. That metabolic vulnerability index is a 6 different samples, and I'm going to go over that next here. Can you all hear me okay?
And so just to give it context for everybody, the relevance, Dr. Strong, is that this is being represented as the greatest predictor of mortality in the next 5 years, better than any other test or any other anything, right? That's what they're saying about it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh
Just
yeah, yeah. Definitely gonna go over that. So it's derived from 6 different metabolites. They say that it's strongly associated with mortality in this large population-based cohort, demonstrating its potential as a promising indicator of mortality risk stratification. So they put these things together and they figure out, okay, what truly is determining what people are dying from? We've had all these things that, we'll go over that people have believed for years are really contributing, and when you run the numbers, they really aren't. So the people in the top quartile are going to be the ones facing the highest mortality risk. So they hold significant implications of early identification of high risk individuals. And I highlighted early because this is something that was developed not so they could fix it. It was just, hey, what's going on with these people? What are they dying from? But what's nice about presenting this to us and what we can do, we can actually make changes in these things. Drugs aren't going to change these things. Lifestyle, yeah, a little bit. Exercise, they're not going to change these things, but we have the tools to be able to do this. So what it tells you is it's the scores were associated with a 1 year and a 5 year mortality. So basically, it's going to tell you within the next 5 years what percent likelihood you have of dying. Everybody wants to know that, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's sad if you just know that, but if you know, hey, I can change that, then it's a little a little less stressful, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll go to the next one here. So this is definitely the best measurement for longevity. It's better than classically the LDL, right? How many years have people been cramming down our throat that LDL needs to be low? And I think with people like Dave Feldman, they've really proven that there is no correlation between LDL and health. We've been given statins for years, and it hasn't made a change in mortality. As a matter of fact, many would argue that it's made things a lot worse. ApoB, grip strength, VO2 max, fitness, telomere length, gender, age. We've all heard people talking about these things, how they're such great indicators of how long you're going to live. But when you actually do this, you realize they're not as good as we thought they were. And some of these even surprise me. Okay. I'll get to the next one here. Okay. So just to kind of let you know where I kind of stumbled on this was I was watching a video by Dr. Darren Schmidt. Does everybody know who that is?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good material out there. And he kind of introduced me to this. So I started watching his videos and I got really fascinated with it. And he's very excited about it and he does a great job explaining it. So I'm going to attempt to do the same thing to explain why I jumped on the bandwagon. And I've done it on many patients already. And I'm in the process of getting some follow-ups to see what kind of changes we made on them. So the original video was actually by a doctor named William Cromwell, and I put the link to this YouTube video. That's where he introduces the MVX. He tells you how they determined all the markers on it and what it'll actually tell you. Basically, he kind of spells out that they followed these huge number of people around and they just kept running labs on them to find out which ones correlate with when they die. And it, once again, it kind of sounds kind of morbid, but when they would die, they have all these numbers on these different labs that they ran. And when they accumulated all the information, they will go, look, these were the ones that actually were bad, and this is what these guys died from. So this is classically what people used to measure longevity by before, right? We think age is a big deal, right? The older you are, the sooner you're going to die, right? We all think that's pretty true. Hypertension, smoking, right? Smokers are going to die really quick. Diabetics, people with previous heart failure, all these things, we always thought these were great determinants of when you're going to die. What's kind of funny though is obesity was one of them on there. I don't see it on here right now, but it's one they talked about. And it's funny because they actually determined that typically obese people will outlive very thin people.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's kind of a surprise to a lot of people, right?
Got a out of a couple of us.
Right. And smokers, right? Everybody talks about you got to stop smoking, you're going to die. But when you look after they ran these tests, look how it's changed after MVX.
Wow.
At the determination of what your true longevity is going to be. And then age is a distant second. I mean, how many people do you know that they're 50 something and then all of a sudden they drop dead? And then you have 90 something year olds. Like, what determines just because I'm 60, that doesn't mean I'm going to die in a year. Maybe when I'm 90 something, but it's a really poor indicator, right? You can see how far down the line it is. And then you get down to these things that we classically thought were really going to determine if we're going to die. And look how low smoking, even diabetes is. I mean, these really shocked me, to tell you the truth. So this is what the index looks like. So what these correlate with is these numbers on the right, the MVX score, these are the numbers that you get when you run the test. And the higher the number, the more likely you're going to die within that time frame. Now, this is a 5-year time frame. So let's just say you're up at a 70. Within the next 5 years, you're looking at almost a 50% risk of dying in the next 5 years.
Hmm.
It's pretty alarming. That's a high score too, but you can see the higher you go, the worse off you are. So you want this score to be a lot lower. So these are the first two that indicate the inflammation. So glyc-A, it just stands for glycoprotein acetylation. That is a marker for inflammation and infection. It also is going to measure small, high-density lipoprotein. That's a marker for metabolic health and toxicity. And I'm going to break these down further. So if we go to glyc-A, so I got to move my thing around here. It's a composite biomarker of systemic inflammation that integrates both the protein levels and the glycosylation states of several of the most abundant acute phase proteins in serum or plasma. So just a fancy way of saying, yeah, showing that you have inflammation based on a bunch of different markers. It's higher in acute and chronic inflammation. So things like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. So these are all the markers that comprise glyc-A. So I have interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor, fibrinogen, C-reactive protein, then the lipoprotein, the Lp(PLA2), and these are all associated with increased production of antimicrobial peptides. So infection. So they're circulating throughout our bodies, and then we can see, hey, something's going on here. I have infection and I have inflammation, which is possibly a result of the infection. So with glyc-A, the lab ranges that they give, they say, okay, to be in a good, healthy range, you want to be less than 400. Now, I'm more of the mind that you want that to be lower, right? So we want to be somewhere between 260 and 300. And it's obvious you don't want to be high because when you're too high, that means, yes, I have an active infection. I have something that's really compromising my immune system. And I don't have a great answer for being too low. The only thing I can really come up with, and I'm just speculating here, is that you always want some level of challenge in your body because this is how our bodies learn and adapt. We're exposed to pathogens all the time, and we want our immune system to be on a little bit. We want to be able to say, okay, good, I have this thing, I'm developing antibodies to it, I'm developing defenses to it. Now, once again, that's just speculation. I don't have any scientific backing to say that.
Well, I would add to that, sometimes people are so depleted, they don't even have the resources to have a response to an immune presence. So that could be another reason why being too low would be not a great thing necessarily.
That's great. And that's actually a wonderful segue for my next section. You always do that to me, right? I'm going to go over that exact thing. So this is, like I said, infection, inflammation, disease. So my line of thinking with this, and like I said, I got to give credit to Dr. Darren Schmidt a lot because I learned a lot of this material from him. And so when I started doing, I got to start living it, right? So my first step would be to check for organisms and pathogens. I know many of us are muscle testers in here, and at the end, I definitely invite Dustin, you, or Dr. V. If what I talk about the testing, if you want to say, hey, this is a really great testing point for a muscle test to be able to determine this as well. So you're invited to do that for me, please. So you can use labs or the testing of your choice. Like I said, muscle testing. Now, Dr. Darren Schmidt, when he's been doing this, he really likes a lab called by Cyrex called Array 12 because that assesses the IgG immune reactivity to pathogens. So it's got a pretty good variety. I think it's something like 26, 27 different pathogens, everything from various molds, viruses, bacterias, the main ones that really are opportunistic to people. So you run these, you can say, yep, you have Epstein-Barr, it's high, obviously. So then we can really target how we want to approach whatever pathogen is bothering somebody. It's because the MVX is just step one, right? So if we notice one of these markers are high, we have to investigate a little bit further, and then we just have to determine how we want to do that. Like I said, Professional Co-op is the one I use. I think they're the only ones that run this right now through LabCorp. So the other one that you can kind of look at if you have a history of clotting issues is the hypercoagulation profile. It's a relatively new one, but it gives you really great information on fibrinogen, homocysteine, lipoprotein A. These are the ones I'm sure most of us have heard of are culprits, at least connected to some clotting and inflammation in our body. I have traditionally used a lot of Vibrant America testing. I really like what they have, but I did run a couple of these and I've been pretty impressed with these so far. I think they're somewhere around $3.99. I could be off a little bit. So relatively speaking, for what you get, that's not a bad price. So this one, the small high density lipoprotein. So this is effective at transferring cholesterol from the cells to the liver for excretion or reuse. It's a crucial step in preventing cholesterol buildup in the arterial walls. So it's going to remove cholesterol from macrophages, and those can accumulate in excess cholesterol and contribute to plaque formation in the arteries, which none of us want. So we want to make sure that's in a good range. They're anti-inflammatory and anti-atherogenic effects. So one of the things that when I look at the research of, okay, why did they choose this one, is it said low levels of this have been associated with higher rates and severity of infection. So if we don't have enough of this to be able to battle infection, it could mean that we have an active infection. So their lab ranges on this are going to be 11.5 to 21.6. And I would speculate the ideal range is going to be kind of on the higher end of that range, 17 to 21. Now, if it's low, then we have a weak immune system. Dustin, you mentioned that a little bit ago. So we don't have the capacity to fight infection. We just have a weak immune system. So you want to look, okay, good, this is low. I need to look at what my toxicity is, what my infection is. You're going to have a reduced cholesterol clearance. So then, like I talked about in the last slide, that can start clogging up your arteries. In my opinion, what I would do if I found this to be low, I would immediately think liver. I want to look to see, do they have a fatty liver? Do they need some clearance? Do they need some drainage support? Milk thistle, Spanish black radish, something like that to address a fatty liver. I'm going to look at the gallbladder. I'm most likely going to run a comprehensive metabolic panel to figure out, okay, where is this issue arising from? I'm going to look at digestion and whatever other things you think could be affecting that low number. Now, if it's high, you probably just eat too many carbohydrates. You want to make sure you're eating nutrient dense and low carb. So you want to make sure you're eating quality food in there to make sure you get it back to a better level. Now, I guess sometimes it could be high. It could be some sorts of genetic factors. I'm not 100% sure on that. But it's pretty interesting because one of the patients that I'll show you later that I ran this on, he is the picture for this. He is a guy who's very healthy, but he likes to have his beer. He likes to have his sweets. And you'll see that represented in his labs, and I show you at the end.
How beneficial is niacinamide for those numbers?
That's another great one. I could have put that right in there. I think that would be a great choice with the flushing action and lowering that. I think that would be a great idea.
Thank you. All right.
No, this test has only been out 4 months, so I have very limited experience with it. So I'll be finding out within the next couple months how effective my protocols have been on this. I'm gonna put my money where where my mouth is, right? I want to find out, am I really doing what I'm saying I'm doing? Right? And this will be my report card, right? To see if I'm actually doing it. So then we get to the other section, which is the metabolic malnutrition index. That's going to be two different areas. One is going to be citrate, which is, to oversimplify, it's a marker for mitochondrial function. And then also branched chain amino acids. The three specific ones that they use are valine, leucine, and isoleucine. And that's going to be markers for malnutrition. With citrate, we know that it's important substrate in cellular energy metabolism. It's used to produce mitochondria. It's used by the Krebs cycle and releasing into the cytoplasm. In cytosol, citrate and its derivatives, acetyl-CoA and oxoacetate, sorry about my pronunciation, are used in normal and pathological processes. So when I looked at some research, their studies have highlighted that citrate is involved in inflammation, cancer, insulin secretion, histone acetylation, neurological disorders, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So see, even though this is a malnutrition number, you can see how there's kind of overlap with different infections, cancer, and inflammation. So they're not completely separate. There's a lot of overlap. So high citrate levels may point to overactive citric acid cycle. That can be triggered by factors like increased energy demands to fighting infection, things like that. Excessive citrate can potentially disrupt other metabolic processes and lead to issues like oxidative stress. It's also associated with ammonia toxicity. I looked at that in the research. And what do we know about ammonia? Well, a lot of times what's involved in there? Parasites, right? Impaired metabolism, potentially due to toxic metals or low cofactors, can also contribute to elevated citrate. So on the test there, their lab range is going to be 1.08 to 2.73. Ideal, according to them, is going to be less than 2.0. So citrate, think my brain goes to toxins, heavy metals, chemicals, plastics, parasites, things like that. So that's what I'm going to kind of gear towards looking at. A high number means the citrate can't get into the cells. So you need that proper amount for that mitochondria to do its job. It's going to put a lot of stress on the mitochondria. And I would look at doing something like a total tox burden. I like the one from Vibrant America. It tells you about mycotoxins, heavy metals. It tells you about chemicals and plastics as well. So I think that's like a perfect lab to run for this.
Hey, Doc, you talk, this is very clear. Obviously, heavy metals, chemicals, plastics, they're inhibiting citrate getting into the cell, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Is there a short list of essential biochemistry that is required to get the citrate into the cell that we're missing too? Is this, you know what I mean? Is there something, I mean, is Gary Brecker right? Do we all need to drink hydrogenated water?
Well, I think it's manyfold here. I think part of it is, immediately looking at toxic burdens on people, because with my experience, I've found, you can give supportive things to people all day long, but if we don't clear out these toxins, there's going to be a lot of trouble. And at the same time, you want to nourish the mitochondria as well. You do it, your choice of whatever you do. You want to do B1, you want to do different herbs, you want to, turmeric, whatever helps stimulate mitochondria and allow them to function.
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms, yeah, right. I was going to save the best for last, right? But if our mitochondria is not functioning, we can't do anything. Like we can't even detox if we're not supporting our mitochondria. A lot of people will go on these detoxes, but they'll kind of miss some of the support that they need. And in my opinion, I think those are the people that get really sick when they try to do a detox. When you're not focusing on drainage and supporting the mitochondria, your body says, I can't do anything with this. And so they end up having like a Herxheimer's reaction. So I would definitely support detox, clean up whatever is burdening their system. And that's what I like about doing labs to determine what the main stressor is. Because if I find out, oh, it's mold, then I'm going to do the herbs and the supplements that really go towards mold. I'm going to say, hey, we need to find out where you're being exposed to mold. Is it an environmental mold? Is it in your food? If it's plastics, I'm going to say, stop drinking out of plastic bottles, right? And then we can do things, Cruciferous Complete, SB Green Food, things that help clear out the plastics. Same thing with chemicals. We had to find out, oh, is it a specific chemical? Okay, where are you being exposed to that? Half of it is stop getting exposed to it. The other half is safely removing it. And then you also just want to support the mitochondria, sulfur or whatever your choice is, right?
Can I just ask really quick for the whole group, does anybody have any novel or new information on how to remove plastics from the body? Right, there's so much news about plastic accumulating in the brain. Is there one thing in particular that you would focus on or you've learned recently that would be helpful with that? Because it seems to be a big issue.
I just started listening to estrogeneration yesterday, and it's going all into that, but I'm not an expert on it yet. Give me another day.
Okay. That's all it takes, huh? SME in one day.
One more bike ride when I listen to the book. But going back on the ammonia thing, you alluded to it with malnutrition and that sort of stuff. Wally Schmidt's protein deficiency test was an ammonia sniff test. And so, the metabolic breakdown where the body's breaking itself down for energy when it's protein deficient, there's a ammonia buildup there. So like I had years ago, I had a gal that worked with me and we were doing a kind of an office cleanup day, and she was cleaning the walls with Windex and almost passed out and was down for the count for almost 2 hours. It turned out she was just completely protein deficient, but breathing the Windex, the ammonia in the Windex was enough to take her out. So,
Wow.
I have an ammonia vial that I test to use to see if a person is protein deficient. Then I'll muscle test, do you need another 10, 20, 30 grams of protein, to help kind of guide them a bit. But just supporting what you're doing, but also kind of, making it more complicated, as Dustin was alluding to, what's the short list? And here I am adding to the list, but
I want the full list, but I want the top, the least like or the most likely suspects to start with,
Yeah. I mean, I would think B5 for both, pantothenic acid for, to stimulate the mitochondria, and then also partially to, help with some of the plastics and so on. And part of what I've did pick up was there was a lactobacillus organism that helps break down and detox plastics out as well. And so again, gut biome goes back to that. So I've been starting to work with that a little bit today on a couple patients.
Nice.
No, excellent point. I love it. Yeah, the muscle breakdown. That's a good observation. I kind of resisted the urge to talk about specific supplements that I use, but anything with sulforaphane, right? I'm a big fan of for removing plastics. There's a particular supplement I like from Cellcore. It's called HMET binder. It stands for heavy metal environmental toxin binder. That's been one of the most effective ones that I've used to remove plastics out of the body. People can literally taste it on their tongue. They can smell it when they go to the bathroom. When it's pulling that plastic out of their body. It's pretty incredible. It's a binder, fulvic and humic acid. So that's one of my favorites.
Two strains that show up with just a little bit of cursory research, Dr. V, are Lactobacillus plantarum, which I know that Metagenics has some research on that, and there's several others. And guess what? Lactobacillus reuteri. Reuteri,
Right.
baby. It always goes back to the beginning.
Is there anything that can't do? I mean,
right?
I should have guessed. I absolutely love that. That one has so many benefits, but yeah, there's another one. Wonderful.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't making your yogurt-like stuff with L-reuteri, you're missing the boat. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It really is.
The next one that it measures as part of the malnutrition is the amino acids, valine, leucine, isoleucine. Now, they have different lab ranges depending on which one you're looking at. And I would say you want to aim for about mid-range, maybe mid to high. So let me move this out of the way here. Okay.
I kind of like the idea
So
of
this
making people smell ammonia and see if they pass out. I'm going to do that from now on. I'm kidding.
Right. And one of the big things we need for that is we need thiamine, right?
Okay.
It's required for proper function of the BCKAD. Dr. V, you talked about this a few weeks ago about B1, right? And all the benefits. So without sufficient thiamine, the activity is reduced and it lead to accumulation of branched chain amino acids, metabolites in the blood. So that's kind of what this is measuring. That enzyme is a complex of enzymes that catalyzes conversions of branched chain amino acids, specifically the leucine, valine, isoleucine, into the respective keto acids. And so this is a crucial step for catabolism. So we need to make sure we're breaking those down, otherwise we run into trouble. So deficiency in thiamine, significant consequences, metabolic disorders, neurological problems, and even death. And I think everybody's aware of that, right? How important B1 is.
Seems like autoimmune conditions should be added to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in there, I had to kind of pick and choose so that I didn't go for 3 hours with this talk. But one of the ones that MVX does talk about with these findings is autoimmune. Absolutely. So if high, then we immediately want to think B1. We want to think thiamine, right? Because we want to be able to get those numbers down. We want to choose the most appropriate form. In my practice, I've been using a few different forms, thanks to Elliot Overton. If anybody's ever heard of him, or if you haven't, I definitely recommend you watch at least a couple of his videos. He's got a lot of great information on thiamine, and just to kind of touch on the topic, TTFD, benfotiamine or benfotiamine, depending where you're from, and thiamine HCl. They all have different kind of mechanisms. I think of benfotiamine as um, handling blood sugar, neuropathies, things like that. TTFD more for digestion and neurological issues. Thiamine HCl, it's not highly absorbed, but you can do mega doses on it very safely. So it's a good one to start with if you think somebody's a little sensitive, and make sure they can tolerate that first, and then we can kind of go to the other ones. I've yet to meet anybody that doesn't do well with benfotiamine though.
I was
So
going to say, to add to that, I just had a case of a lady who had terrible neuropathy in her leg. We were doing everything for months, you name it. And finally, I got her on some benfotiamine, and the next month she said it's gone, just gone, and in a low dose of it too.
yeah.
So it was really nice to see that.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with it. Traditionally, I've always kind of been a little guarded against any type of synthetics, right? But I think there's a few that really have their place. I think they can help us when we do it right, which is, lead me to the next one thing that I'm talking about here is it's really important if you're going to do high dose thiamine, really in any form, especially like TTFD, you want to make sure you're adding a B complex because as you're adding it higher, it's going to place other demands on the body. Your body's going to go, okay, great. I have all this B1, but now I need all the cofactors to be able to do the job that you're asking me to do.
Mhm.
And that's where we have to get a little clever. We have to say, okay, let's make sure we get the whole B complex in there, making sure we have magnesium, potassium. We got to check for methylation and sulfation, all the appropriate things for that as well. Molybdenum, if they have issues with sulfation. So we really have to, we can't just, willy-nilly just throw it at them. And you don't want to go high dose immediately either. That's one of those things that we really want to start low and slow. You want to build up, but make sure you do have all those cofactors. Because I've been doing it, I don't know, maybe 8 months. I've been using that a lot. And if you don't give adequate cofactors, people can have kind of bad reactions. So we do have to be a little bit careful with that. Now, if it's low, I'm going to suspect malabsorption. So, breaking down the muscle, right? Digestive issues. Do they have Crohn's? Do they have irritable bowel? Are they just not able to assimilate nutrition in their bodies? They have just poor protein digestion. So you can supplement with maybe raw food, right? Raw eggs, highly digestible food, branched chain amino acids, even. I know you've done a little bit of that, Dustin, and for some people, that's exactly what they need. Their digestion's so compromised, you just have to, have to give that to them, and it helps them through a little bit of a hurdle. It can make a big difference. So I put a few different that I did. I took out the names just for privacy's sake here. So this is one that I ran on a patient. Now this patient has autoimmune issues. She's sickly. She's very frail, right? And well, look at that. The small HDL particle number is low. She doesn't have the capacity to fight infection. She's had several surgeries, and I think it's kind of cutting it off here. I think she's like 39 years old.
39 is what it says.
39, yeah. And so it's kind of interesting that it's this report card that I'm getting because, yeah, it speaks to what she is. And you can see her index is kind of high at 52 for only being 39 years old. But what's really neat and what some people are finding that where when they put these together, they thought, okay, you're going to get these numbers and that's sticking with you. You're going to be in big trouble. You're going to die. But what some people have found is that you can actually make pretty dramatic changes quite quickly. Now, like I said, I haven't done any post studies yet, but Dr. Schmidt has, and I've seen his numbers dramatically change within a month, which makes me very optimistic that we can do that, especially if you have something like this, right? Okay, let's look at this. What would we do about this? This is too low. So we definitely want to look at toxicity. We want to look at our ability to digest food. because we know it's compromised because I know her history. This one here, 74-year-old female. You can see her glycase really high and her citrate's high as well. So this person is toxic and has infection. So this lady in particular, she has an infected tooth. She's one where I've done a lot of work with her, and if you can believe it or not, this is probably way better than it would have been a year ago. But she is compliant with everything we've talked about, and she's feeling way better. But I thought, okay, well, you're feeling better, but let's see if you're actually getting better. And when I ran this, I realized we have a lot of work to do. And so I finally, with this lab, which is interesting, this lab convinced her to finally go to a biological dentist because I've been telling her for over a year, you got to do something. You have an infection in your mouth. You've got to do something about this. And this was enough to convince her, okay, I better go do this now. So she's going to go get a cone beam and find out where that infection is and get it taken care of. So I found that through muscle testing. This 72-year-old female, let's see, she had an acute respiratory infection when we ran this panel. So she could hardly breathe. She would get winded walking up the stairs. And it wasn't a heart issue per se, right? She didn't have any heart symptoms, but it was just respiratory all day long. And then with her, definitely found out, we did further studies, and she had a terrible parasite infection. So we're in the process of working with parasites with her right now. As a matter of fact, she is going sometime, I think today, she's going to get her second one. So we'll see if we made a difference with this and see if we brought down that glycate. This one here, this guy is interesting, right? 70 years old. This is a guy that likes his beer. Okay. So he likes his beer, he likes his sweet. But look at him. He has the lowest number I have ran on anybody yet. He has a 29. This guy,
What kind of beer is he drinking? I need to maybe try some.
yeah, what beer is it exactly, right? But
Mm.
I mean, very compliant patient. He takes his supplements, he does what you want, but he also likes his beer and his sweets. And I think that is the only thing that is doing that to him. It's burdening his system, and his cholesterol is not getting cleared like it needs to be. And so now that I showed him this, he goes, oh, yeah, I better do something about this. I better stop eating frozen pizzas. So that's the second person that, because of this test, they finally decided to listen.
Wow.
Do you know how
But I
his
mean, look at that.
A1C was? Do you know how this guy's
I
A1C
don't
was?
recall off the top of my head. It's been a while since I ran that lab with him. Yeah.
Mhm. Just because you got that glycate at 372, which is under their range, but over your 300 mark that you said was better.
Mhm.
And if he's liking, beer and sugar, just curious how much glycation he's got going on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, excellent point. Yeah, and I think he probably does, right? He like I said, he likes his sweets and when I muscle test him, he always tests for either Diaplex or GT, or what's it called now, chromium complex. I always have him on something like that, or berberine. And I
There we go.
think it's whatever he's doing, he keeps feeding what little infection he has. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what's keeping that glycai and those particle numbers low. So,
Mhm.
and I think this is
There's a glycation reflex if you wanted.
Oh yeah. Hook us
oh
up,
yeah, that'd
Dr.
be
B.
great. Yeah, can you show us that, Dr. B?
Yeah, it's basically palm palm up on the sternum this way. Camera's not is following my face, but it's basically here. So, think of like yeast, as a down yeast is a bilateral knife edge over, but it's kind of the opposite of that with the palm up over the sternum is indication of glycation. So that's help us know, if berberine or what's going to help handle A1C that's out of whack.
Wow.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, for years I've had him on one of those things to handle that because like I said, he's compliant to a point, but that's where he kind of draws the line up until recently. Well, so he claims. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens, right?
What becomes valuable on a person like this is your issues are now starting to compromise your starting this plaquing process. Right? That's we that
I'm getting pretty choppy audio. I didn't really catch any of that.
it's my internet.
Did anyone else hear that?
Yeah, I can hear that he's totally chopped up. Yeah.
Yeah, he's frozen. I'm sorry, Dr. B, I didn't catch any of that.
Let's hope he comes back and he can tell us a little bit later. He looks like he
Okay.
dropped off and
I think I just have this one left here, this 65-year-old female.
okay.
She about 6 months ago, she had a knee replacement, and her knee has been hot and swollen ever since.
Mm,
And I every time I muscle test her, I said it's that knee. It introduced some kind of infection. So I said let's run this new test on you. And case in point, 424, which is I think even though their range says less than 400, I think that's pretty high. And she's got a very apparent infection. You can put your hand over her knee, you can feel the heat.
wow.
So that's the next thing we're going to be working at her. That's going to be a bit of a tough one. We're working at a lot of things. She's feeling better, but this might be one of those things where something needs to be cleaned out of there because it's been a real battle with her. So I do want to make one more point on, and then I want to turn it over to like questions or if you guys want to talk about points to test for muscle testing. Is one thing I did learn about B1 is the blood tests are kind of poor, right? We can test and it can show that we have adequate thiamine, but what I found and what I've learned is that you can have different organs in the body that are isolated deficiencies in B1. So your heart, for instance, your blood levels show that your thiamine is fine, but your heart has a much higher demand for it, or your kidney, or some place in your body. So might have isolated deficiencies with B1. So the reason I say that, I just caution you, even if these numbers look good, right? Oh, okay, right. That's right where it's supposed to be. So I guess they don't need any B1 because it's not too high. However, if through muscle testing or just through trial and error, you add the B1 and you see those symptoms get better. I've seen that happen a number of times with people already in the last 8 months that I've been doing this, doing the B1 loading, is they get dramatically better. Their digestion gets better, their blood sugar handling gets better, their balance gets better. All these things from adding that, even though their numbers look okay. So I think we can have really specific isolated areas of deficiencies with B1. It's a phenomenon I learned about from Elliot Overton because I'd never really thought about that before. But he made a point where, yeah, that can definitely be the case with people. So even though this test is great, I love it. I'm going to be using this a lot because I think it's very telling. There's definitely other things we gotta look at. So I know I talked a lot, rambled. I hope some of this was useful. If anybody has any questions or anybody wants to add on to anything, please feel free.
So seeing that it can change in a month, how often are you telling people right now that they think they should do it? Once in a lifetime, once every 5 years, once a year?
Oh, that's a good point. It's really inexpensive. Really inexpensive. So I'm going to have, depending on how bad they are, the people with these really high numbers, I'm having them do it about a month and a half later.
Okay.
People that with good numbers, I'm going to say, well, let's do it quarterly because these things can change pretty fast. You can get a sinus infection, you can get a toenail infection, and it can skyrocket your glycate. And so I'm looking at month and a half for most people that I want to see what kind of changes we're making. I think that's adequate amount of time to make some big changes with people.
Hmm.
It is really affordable.
Did you this on this 65-year-old that you're showing right now? Do you have a sulfation reflex? You have a way to check for Lyme sulfation?
Oh, yeah. No, I should though. Yeah, please demonstrate.
I mean, I would check for, some kind of maybe a spirochete in that knee potentially, right? And so, because that
Mhm.
affects sulfation. one of the virus, spirochete, or parasite, but because that'll compromise sulfation, so then that's going to impede the wound healing, the recovery. Would be pretty typical with a localized joint infection like that. Sulfation reflex is midline. See if the camera follows me again. It's going to be here. So if the liver is basically from the thenar eminence to the fingertips, the whole liver reflex. So it's
Okay.
basically over the thenar eminence is where the sulfation reflex is. So maybe, look at that with this guy. And then if that's positive, or weak sulfation, then we look at like myrrh, or Spanish black radish, one of the supplements that's going to facilitate sulfation. Maybe you can get to that localized infection that way.
That's a great idea. Yeah, so far, I primarily use the Yulin test kit, and what she had tested for in her knee was bacteria and fungus so far. But I think it's a great idea to check that sulfation, and I'll do that when I see her next.
Yeah. So if it shows positive, then myrrh would be the way to go. If it's bacteria that's showing up.
Dr. V, when
Okay,
you
wonderful.
test for myrrh, do you test for a pulse dose? Like, do you check for a range of how many days?
Yes. So P450, if it starts overdriving P450, which is the fingertip part, the spleen 21 reflex, then that's tells me how long to go. So, I'll have them take it. Typically I'm kind of more of a low dose guy, so I'll have them take one or two for 2 to 4 weeks typically. I know some of the other, Yulin and so on is going to do higher dose, shorter durations. That seems to be where I end up,
So
one
you're
to
saying
two.
myrrh forte 1 to 2 for up to 2 weeks, sometimes straight, is what gets the job
Yes.
done. What you're finding, okay?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, because I think that what they taught the Midian people was like 4 twice a day, 4 days on, 10 days off, right? That's like their standard response.
Mhm.
That's cool to know. Okay, cool. And you check that duration over the P450 pathway.
Yes.
Okay, very cool.
Carrie Bone's the one that said P450 upregulates too much if they do it too long. So that's where I got the idea to test it against P450. Mhm.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice.
Now, are you assessing lifespan at all? Or because I know at the beginning you were saying that if I think you were saying if a lot of these markers are off, that they could die within 5 years, 50% chance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I'll go back to the graph here. What they indicate is that the higher the number, the more the percent likelihood that you have of dying within the next 5 years is what the test determines. And what they found was where they used to think age was a big determinant of how long you're going to live. After they ran all these studies, they realized it's really not that much of a indicator, right? So you could be 90 and still live another 20 years. But a better test is look at these markers on the MVX.
So are you
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, are you telling patients how long they have to live or like showing this graph? Are you
Well,
the Grim Reaper?
I play to the audience. It depends what they're willing to hear and what they want to hear, right? I kind of customize the way I present information depending on how I think they're going to take it, right?
Yeah.
If you have some good old boy that just says, tell it to me straight, then I'm like, yeah, it's not looking good, man. But if you have somebody that's really, really sensitive, you say, all right, this is what we're going to work at, all right? I always keep everything positive. I let them know. I'll never tell anybody anything if I think they can't do anything about it.
Right.
Like, I think that would just be irresponsible, right?
Good
If
point.
I know
And
we
then
can
you'd be
have
an
an
MD.
impact, then I tell. What's that?
Then you'd be an MD.
Right, exactly. I don't stamp their
And for
foot.
PG.
No, I just let them know that, hey, this is where the trajectory is going right now. I said we can make dramatic changes if we're willing to do these things. And they're like, okay, yeah, let's do this. I don't want this to happen. I don't want to die. I don't make things sound morbid to patients, but I'm kind of matter of fact, but I'm also very hopeful and optimistic because I know that we can make these changes. We can make them better. And then optimistic myself that when we see these numbers change, they're going to go, look at that. That changed in a month and a half.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm looking for.
Just
Would
got
you
an
ever
extra 5 years with the grandkids.
There you go. Yeah.
would you ever promote this as, oh, see how well your longevity is, or I don't know. Would you ever promote it like that, or are you just doing it for specific and not really telling them?
What the way I've been presenting it as is I literally say this is my report card for how well I'm doing with you.
Hmm.
I'll say I want to find out where we're at with these things, and then I want to improve these numbers. So, for instance, the gentleman with 29, right? That's pretty good. I said that's good, but we can do better. And you could see the glycate was a little high. He's the guy with the beer obsession. So that's kind of how I say, yeah, let's really see what's going on so that we know for sure. Because I think you've seen many people where they look really good, right? They look healthy, and it's very deceiving. They're like, wow, this person looks like they could run a marathon. And then you run different labs, you're like, oh no, yeah, don't run a marathon. And so, but you got to be honest with people, right? I do a lot with the heart sound recorder too. And if I see where exercise could literally make them drop dead, I'm going to say, do not exercise right now. We got to get this fixed first.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of play to the audience depending on what they want to hear. But yeah, it's so new. I'm still kind of developing how I really want to present this.
Well, I think we all talk about longevity. That's our goal. But I think one way I would say, Dr. Rebecca, is it's irrelevant. Anything beyond 5 years, if you can't make it the next 5 years, longevity is irrelevant, right?
Mhm.
You got to get through the next 5 years first before we can worry about 90, 95, or 195, I would say. But
I've often said that the most powerful practice management tool we could have would be a crystal ball. Say
Mhm.
you take this, B1 supplement. This is what the quality of your life's going to look like. You ignore it and don't do what I say. This is what the quality of your life's going to look like. This is, the proverbial crystal ball, right? This is how long you have potentially to live if you keep doing what you're doing. You make a couple of changes. Now they come back 2 months later and you've reduced their MVX by half. Look, you just added not only quantity, but quality to your years. So that's, kind of like we appreciate you taking owning responsibility. Like, hey, this is my report card, but this is also their crystal ball to inspire them to make the appropriate changes, to listen to what you're saying so that they're not just leaving content with what they experience in your office. They're leaving excited because they just added quality to their years, and they're going to be bragging about you a whole lot more to their friends and colleagues, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I love how many things this one test encompasses too. And like I said, it's kind of a starter point in many regards. It can say, okay, now we got to figure out what this infection is, or if it's the valine, isoleucine being high, we say, okay, it's a no-brainer. We're doing thiamine with the appropriate cofactors.
Have you seen enough to know, like, are there specific organs based on those individual aminos? There's different, are those related to different organs in particular?
Oh, interesting. I think you were out when I kind of talked about this, but not specifically. But one thing I did mention is by watching Elliot Overton, I definitely learned that having a systemic amount of B1 adequate definitely doesn't indicate that you don't necessarily need it, because there can be organs that are starving for B1 where all your other levels are fine, but a specific organ is very hungry for B1. So even though your levels look good, you can have something that has a lot more demand for that B1. I think you've probably seen that in practice. I've
Yeah.
seen evidence of it just doing these protocols with people with B1 where their life changes. I've had people where they're dizzy all the time. They feel like they have to touch things so they don't fall over. And I did benfotiamine with them. And a few weeks later, they're like, I don't feel like I'm going to fall over anymore. I don't feel like I'm leaning anymore. Digestive issues have dramatically gotten better using that TTFD. So even though their numbers looked fine, they told a different story when we actually gave them the B1.
So I did hear some of that. I was just curious, like if like certain organs were more related to the valine versus the leucine and the isoleucine. You know, if maybe isoleucine was more related to the immune system, valine,
Yeah.
I don't know, adrenals or livers, you know, any of that sort of stuff. Just
That's a good
curious.
question. No, I
Mhm.
haven't really put that connection together yet, but that's
Mhm.
definitely worth looking into.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's something I'll look for now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Did any other questions? Did anybody want to add anything to it?
Quiet Dr. Fujita, he's got to have some input here.
Sorry, no questions at the moment. I have to step out to sign up a new patient, so I missed part of it. But maybe, Dustin, you're recording this? Could
It is
I?
recording. Yeah. Let me, at the end of this, I'm going to email this out to everybody once I get it downloaded. Also, I'm going to send an email with some options for topics for next month. So you guys can send back your feedback. And if anybody feels like they want to present on those topics, that would be great. But we can always just discuss them. Because
Anybody,
we and I are getting a ton of requests now for different topics for us to cover,
Cool.
which is fun. I'm looking at June 12th, by the way, for the next date. If everybody's okay with that. That's the plan. It's June 12th. So next.
anybody done a deep dive on the CDR, the cell danger response yet?
I don't even know
Yes,
what you're talking
No.
oh.
about.
Yeah, it's kind of big on a lot of the podcasts lately. It's kind of that goes back a little bit to the mitochondrial stuff. It's basically where the mitochondria shut down in the present and stop producing energy in a crisis, meaning toxins or virus or immune challenge. So that's kind of why the energy tanks, when we're toxic or sick. So that's some of that like cellular cleansing and different protocols like that people are talking about. Might be another fun thing to look at some point in this journey.
Cell danger response. Sounds good to me.
Robert, Robert Navio is kind of the one that initially spearheaded the research on it. And I think he's the one that coined the CDR term.
Okay. Okay. Putting it on the list.
All right.
Is anyone drinking hydrogen water?
That's the other topic we've had the most requests about. So I think we should talk about that next time, honestly. Hydrogen water. Well overdue.
Is Dr. Rebecca coming on Truth or Trend talking about hydrogen water?
Maybe. We were going to talk about emotion code, I thought, on Truth
Oh,
or
that's right, huh?
that's our whatever she wants to talk about, she could talk about as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know enough about hydrogen water. Yeah.
So here's what I know about hydrogen water is obviously the whole goal of it is to help reduce oxidative stress, right? Or reduce reactive oxygen species. And so we all know many other ways that we can achieve that, actually having vitamin C and vitamin E and those types of things. I think, I don't know. I always ask it is where would you find it in nature? They say you would get it from water that's rushing through a river and drinking that water to get the excess hydrogen, but that's just it. I think it's more about assessing your reactive oxygen species with nature. And I think a lot of those machines out there that people are selling to make the water hydrogen water are bad. Then I took a deep dive into that. Most of them are just nothing. They don't do anything, quite honestly. So
I heard that some of them work for a while and then it changes chemistry or whatever they're using doesn't really work anymore. The metals kind of deteriorate and then it stops working. And I looked up the tabs too, and the tabs are just a bunch of chemicals to create bubbles. And I'm like, well, that's not good.
yeah, I actually tried it for a little while and I didn't notice really anything. I don't know. Did
Oh.
anybody else tried it?
I've tried it. I didn't notice anything either.
Yeah.
I tried it and I performed like a slug. I'm like, no, I'm over it.
Oh, see,
Oh,
I
it
knew there
slowed
was
you down?
What's that?
It
I
slowed
tried
you
that.
down?
Yeah, I mean the challenge was I had two or three other variables on the bike ride I did it, but it was
Huh.
such a strong kind of governor that suppressed my performance on a high intensity day that I've self-tested it several times since, and I've got an unopened bottle in my cabin in my pantry now.
Yeah, my instincts were not always crazy about it, but I tried and I did listen to it. But I don't think that's the way we were intended to deal with reactive oxygen species.
Mhm.
In fact, deep breathing, believe it or not, I mean, even though oxygen is the last, right, on the electron transport chain, deep breathing has been shown in a lot of studies to reduce reactive oxygen species. So I think throwing more hydrogen in there is not necessarily the right answer. Definitely not long term, I don't think, for sure. Because we don't breathe hydrogen, right? We breathe in oxygen. So that's just my spin on it. But we could definitely take a deeper dive into it next time. Sounds good to me.
Nice pun.
Yeah.
Your spin on it, huh?
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording. So unless anybody has anything profound to share with those who are going to watch the recording, last chance. All right. Thank you.